Hi, my name is Matteo Fini and I'm Senior Consultant at IHS Automotive in charge of the annual OEM-Supplier Relations study, which IHS conducts since 2006. So my intention is to give you a quick overview of the results of the annual study and showcase some of the capabilities that IHS Automotive has developed in this area. I'll start with some of the reasons why we are conducting this study. So why now? How the study is conducted in terms of methodology. Then I'll dip into the results with a focus on the VW group. And finally closing on some examples of how IHS might be able to help you in your strategic decision planning. Starting with the view of the relationship from the supplier side. So suppliers have historically seen OEMs as unfair customers. So leopards will never change their spots and will always stick to their adversarial approach in the relationship, which will, in many cases, ultimately lead to the supplier's financial distress. So back in the days, there was little notion of the supplier relationship management concepts within OEM's purchasing department. So how to carry out vendor marketing or how to establish a lean and global supply stream. Things have changed over time because now the purchasing department is effectively integrated within the strategic goals of the OEMs, and the chief procurement officers are now are in the control room, so are part of the selected list of C-level executives who actually decide the strategic goals for each OEM. Let's see how the industry environment has put a spotlight on OEM-supplier relations, and if eventually that leopard will change its spots. I'm sure you agree with me that over the last 20 years we have witnessed a shift of responsibilities from OEMs to suppliers, with OEMs focusing on some steps of the automotive value chain and suppliers becoming increasingly a source of innovation for the OEMs. And I've listed there just some of the fields, for example, downsizing or lightweight solutions and infotainment, just to name a few. So clearly, earlier and more intense collaboration between OEMs and suppliers is required to ensure that that technology is actually implemented in the final products which are sold on the dealership floor. But there are, however, also other factors that put a spotlight on OEM-supplier relations. For example, the risks associated with global launches and global sourcing. There are situations where OEMs are requesting suppliers to support their launches in a number of locations dispersed around the world. Cases like Toyota's IMV project with as many as 8 launches within the same calendar year. So this creates clearly some significant challenges for suppliers as well as for OEMs, in terms of capital requirements, in terms of ensuring the necessary resources are deployed to support those launches. So suppliers are increasingly requested to provide a competitive cost structure in a number of locations with flawless execution capabilities and the same technical solution. Then there is also global sourcing, which is basically the attempt of OEMs to leverage the labor cost differentials and other contingencies which are linked to low-cost countries. That clearly means that there are new market entrants within the OEM's bidding lists, and at the same time there are opportunities for OEMs to leverage those new market entrants to lower their procurement bill. Also, the way OEMs are pursuing their economies of scale is creating bigger opportunities for suppliers because basically the size of the contracts which are put out on offer is getting bigger and bigger because of these economies of scale. And we forecast that by 2015 as much as almost 1/4 of the global light vehicle production will be underpinned by the top 10 platforms. And while that creates economies of scale for OEMs, it also amplifies the business opportunities for those lucky suppliers who are able to support those volumes. But there are also some other interesting ways by which OEMs attempt to create the economies of scale. For example, component standardization and the reduction of component proliferation. So from 10 versions of the same components, we are down to only 2 or 3 versions just to accommodate the entry level, standard, and premium variations of the same component. And OEMs are quite strict in applying such policies, starting with non-customer facing components and now also on customer facing components. There has also been a shift from the traditional platform strategy to a modular platform strategy. In other words, the attempt to use the same module not only across different programs which are underpinned by the same platform, but also across different platforms, and that clearly creates even higher volumes per part. And there are OEMs like BMW or VW which are particularly strict in applying such policies. So the buyers and the engineers have limited choices in the modules down to the component level, and any detour from such strategy requires top management approval, which clearly narrows down the choices. So we see that clearly the technology requirements are forcing OEMs and suppliers to find their optimum match. We live in an intense launch environment, tightening cadence, and skills imbalance. That means that both OEMs and suppliers have to find a strategic partner. And finally, there is basically a new era in portfolio optimization, because suppliers are being required to deploy significant resources to support the growth of volumes per part. So clearly, OEM-supplier relations are increasingly having an impact not only on the top and the bottom line of the supplier, but also on its innovation proposition, as well as on ultimately on the success on the marketplace for both the OEM and the supplier. So what does it mean to have good relations for OEMs and suppliers? For the supplier, it means that the OEM is more willing to leave the supplier some healthy margins. It has a negotiation style which is more innovation-driven rather than price-driven. And the OEM can be construed to be more oriented towards a long-term partnership, and conversely the supplier has a long-term view of the relationship and therefore is less likely, let's say, to claim some additional costs in the event of engineering changing orders or tooling cost claims. Also for the OEM, the benefit is that it can have a better access to the supplier's cost structures, and the supplier is obviously more willing to open its books, and then the OEM can help the supplier become more efficient. So beyond the reasons, let's now, the reasons why we are conducting the study, let's dip into some of the methodology and in the results for 2012. 230 suppliers have taken part in this study, representing roughly 6,400 contracts, with 52 of the top 100 suppliers taking part in the study, and a variety of company sizes, business functions, and component sectors that basically gives you the different segments of which are forming the supply base. If you are not already familiar with it, the Shore Index is a measure of the quality of relations between OEMs and the suppliers, and basically showing on a quantitative scale the qualitative ratings given by suppliers in the annual OEM supplier relations survey. So suppliers are called upon to give their ratings on 29 questions, which are effectively the 29 KPIs of the index, and these questions encompass a variety of aspects, some more relational, for example, the quality of communication, or some more managerial, for example, the management of engineering changing orders, and some more commercial aspects, let's say, such as the payment terms and the demands for price reductions. The 29 KPIs are then allocated in 5 categories: profit potential, organization, trust, pursuit of excellence, and outlook. If you sum up the results for each individual category, you have a number between 0 and 1000, the Shore index. The idea here is to cover the entire continuum of the supply from when the supplier issues from when the OEM issues the RFQ to when new business is allocated. A Shore index higher than 650 is considered somewhat satisfactory, while anything below 450 indicates basically that the state of relations is poor. Now let's go through the 2012 results, starting from the top of the ranking. As you can see, there is a marked variance in the results, with the top associated with the BMW of 617 and the bottom associated with the Chery of 370. In 2012 results, we see that BMW has taken the leadership from Porsche, and it appears that this leadership is based on an increased profit potential for BMW suppliers. And this is good news for suppliers because the car maker has gone through quite intense cost reduction program, which has resulted in BMW losing favor among its supply base. What is also interesting is that the classic pattern, which saw Japanese car makers dominating the top positions, followed by German premium and then other mass car makers, has been broken because of the deteriorating positions and ratings for Toyota and Honda. In the middle part of the ranking, it's interesting to note that some car makers which were traditionally at the bottom, particularly Detroit 3, have slowly crawled up in the ranking, and now we see that Chrysler is occupying above than average position. In the bottom part of the ranking, instead, we see that the list of car makers which is sort of lingering around that critical threshold is becoming quite long, with some car makers for which effectively OEM-supplier relations become a detrimental point and a source of competitive disadvantage. And now I would like to focus on VW because I think it's a good example to show how different brands within the same corporate entity handle relations in a different way. So let's look first at an overall view of our relations between VW, its affiliate brands, and their respective supply bases have evolved over the last 7 years. As you can see, clearly there is a deterioration of the quality of relations between the VW group and the supply base, although for the different brands this happens to a different extent and with different timings. Particularly with the mainstream brands like the Volkswagen namesake brand, Seat and Skoda, these brands seem to suffer more from a deterioration of relations. So at the beginning of the crisis, buyers of the VW mainstream brands have become more adversarial towards their suppliers, while in the case of Porsche, it seems that this car maker has seen its relations deteriorate, starting with the start of the integration with VW. As for Audi, it seems that its ratings are developing sort of in line with those of the VW mainstream brands, although clearly there is a different positioning due to the fact that we're talking about a premium car maker here. However, if we look at just at the profit potential, Audi seems to be much less of a premium car maker. Suppliers are telling us here that basically there isn't a great deal of difference when supplying Audi or when supplying other mainstream brands of the VW group. And also Audi appears to be less of a premium car maker when compared to the likes of BMW and Mercedes. While in terms of profit opportunities for Porsche suppliers, well, clearly there are still quite a few left there. But in order to make all the analysis more meaningful, I think it's the case now to create a segmentation and to compare peers. So what we have done here is, by using the production volume levels and the price class levels, which are part of our syndicated services, we have come up with three archetypes of OEMs: premium OEMs, volume car makers, and some selected emerging car makers. So when we focus on VW, we'll have to compare it with the likes of Ford, Fiat, Renault, Toyota, and so on. So let's look at the Shore Index first on an aggregated basis for all volume car makers, and then on the individual components of the Shore, the 5 other individual components of the Shore Index. On an aggregated basis, we see that Toyota within the volume peer group is still the preferential customers for suppliers, although its ratings have dropped significantly compared to 2006. And this is a trend which affects also other Japanese car makers like Nissan and Honda. And at this point, we can wonder whether it's the Japanese archetype of relations with suppliers that is losing favor within the supply base. At the same time, we notice that also PSA and Renault ratings are dropping significantly, while the Detroit 3 have improved. Finally, there are certainly some car makers for which relations become a competitive disadvantage. This is clearly the case of Seat and Skoda. Also interesting is to notice the significant differences of ratings within the same corporate entity, and this is the case of Volkswagen, Skoda, and Seat. But so let's look at the individual components. So starting with the profit potential. So who is the customer that leaves suppliers better profit opportunities? Clearly, both Toyota and Honda are dominating the ranking. But what is interesting here is to note that Fiat, for example, is the strictest customer when it comes to commercial aspects, with particularly poor ratings in terms of payment terms, while also Volkswagen and Seat do not seem to shine for the profit opportunities that they leave to suppliers. In terms of organization, we see that Toyota and Mazda and Honda are still, I would say, the standard, are still setting the standard in this category, although this is also the area where their ratings are dropping the most, which can somehow indicate also a dilution of some of that corporate culture of relating well with the suppliers. It's interesting to note also that Volkswagen and Seat ratings of this category are dropping, while Skoda between 2006 and 2012 has improved. So which is the most trustworthy customer for suppliers? Toyota doesn't dominate this part of the Shore Index, and it appears that this is linked to the fact that it seems to protect less the supplier's intellectual property, while Seat, together with the Hyundai, GM and Volkswagen, are deemed among the most untrustworthy customers. In particular, in the case of Seat and Volkswagen, it seems that this is linked to the fact that they are more willing to shift business to a cheaper supplier during the course of a contract. So that clearly creates additional pressures for the supply base. Let's look now at the pursuit of excellence. In this case, we are assessing how demanding is an OEM in terms of operational performance, so logistics, or technology and quality. Clearly, both Toyota and Volkswagen are extremely demanding customers, but what is striking here is the difference of ratings within the same group between Volkswagen, Skoda and Seat, which can hint at the fact that probably particularly in the area of inbound quality requirements, there seem to be significant differences within the same group, with Skoda and Seat probably applying the same requirements in a different way towards the supply base. While in terms of outlook as a customer, we are assessing the long-term prospects and the attractiveness of a certain of the various OEMs within the volume peer group. Clearly, Volkswagen has quite a strong vendor preference, which is linked not only to the market momentum, but also to the fact that the Volkswagen brand for suppliers is a sort of a gate which leaves them the opportunity to access the wider and bigger group volumes. While suppliers seem to be quite less upbeat with regards to Skoda and Seat. So let's look at one of the categories forming the index, the profit potential one, with all the individual KPIs forming this category. In this case, we are comparing Peugeot Citroën with the Volkswagen brand, which is indicated in light blue. Suppliers are telling us that PSA seems to give them a better return on investment compared to VW, and VW is particularly aggressive in terms of willingness to pay development costs, satisfaction about the tooling cost reimbursement. No, that's not. So let's look at just one of the categories forming the shore index, the profit potential one, with all the individual KPIs forming this category, as an example of the analysis that we could carry out. In this case, you have VW brand indicated in light blue and Peugeot Citroën indicated in yellow. Suppliers are telling us basically that PSA seems to offer them a better return on investment compared to the VW brand. And VW brand is quite aggressive in terms of pretty much any commercial aspects, such as the payment of development costs, tooling costs, and raw material price adjustments. At the same time, the negotiations with the VW brand seems to take longer compared to PSA, and PSA still offers worse payment terms compared to VW. One of the big advantages that VW has compared to PSA, in this case, according to the suppliers who have participated in the study, is that VW offers much more precise volume planning compared to the French brands. Well, let's look also at another analysis that we can carry out, which is the OEM negotiation style analysis. In this case, what we are doing is trying to understand the negotiation style of an OEM. So is it more technology driven or is it more price driven? So in this graph, as you can see, we have plotted two indexes, one representing the importance of technology and one representing the importance of prices in negotiations. Clearly, the higher a logo or an OEM badge is in this graph, the more its negotiation style is going to be driven by technology, while the more it is on the left, the more it's going to be driven by prices. The three archetypes that I mentioned before, so premium car makers in yellow, volume car makers in blue, and selected emerging car makers in purple, repeat themselves here. And it's now quite interesting to see how different within the same peer groups things change significantly in terms of negotiation style. And at this point, I would like you to think about who could be that premium car maker circled in red on the right-hand side, that seems to be quite demanding in terms of technology and is not really too bothered by prices. Or who could be that other premium car maker who seems to require a great deal of technology but doesn't seem to be overly willing to pay for it? Or finally, who is this volume car maker who is quite tough on prices and at the same time requires a great deal of technology from the supply base? Well, I'm sure now you have thought about it, and these are the answers revealed. Clearly, we can also highlight how things develop on a year-on-year basis. So, for example, let's look at just Nissan and how things change between 2011 and 2012. And it's clear that Nissan has got sort of more European in its negotiation style, and it has detached itself from Japanese car makers by becoming more focused on cost and less on technology. You can obviously offer specific crosscuts and identify key trends. For example, by focusing just on certain commodities, or certain subsector, for example, just the braking, steering subsectors, or just certain OEMs and certain countries, or comparing what suppliers within a certain range of automotive sales are saying about their customers. We offer also a more comprehensive service where we help suppliers identify which are the customers to target based on the specific findings of a certain sector, or which are the customers to target and how to target them when suppliers have their best product innovation to propose, or how to add a new customer to your product portfolio, or how to restructure your product portfolio within a certain sector. So bottom line, while the notion of the importance of good OEM-supplier relations is understood by both OEMs and suppliers, it is still a long way before suppliers see the OEMs as their fair customers. So clearly what suppliers have to do is to increase their negotiation leverage, is to implement some strategies, for example, by becoming leaner. Yes, it's true that there has been a great deal of actions that suppliers in both North America and Europe have implemented to become profitable at much lower SAR levels, but still much remains to be done on this front. Also, do your R&D homework, because there are some innovation streams which are clearly not exploited by suppliers, and those are the innovation streams where they could protect their margins in an easier way towards their customers, or by going global and diversifying. And I'm sure this is a lesson that suppliers hear many times. But with the global platforms which are increasingly featured on both European and North American and Asian plants, there are opportunities for suppliers to extend their relationship on the much more significant global stage, before this becomes effectively a threat on their doorsteps with the new suppliers entering the market. And also be selective, because it doesn't make any business sense to try to nurture a relationship with an existing customer, or try to develop business with a new customer by winning high risk or toxic, I would call them, programs where you know that actual volumes will be 50 or 60% of RFQ levels. And also be special, because if you are not special in terms of for your cost structure, your product or your footprint, chances are high that you are going to be crossed out of an OEM's bidding list. And also look upstream, because OEMs like to see suppliers able to master the tier 2 operations, and that is a good opportunity for suppliers to become more efficient by lowering their costs potentially, and at the same time be able to bid on the unbundled part of contracts. By making sure that all these gears engage, we might end up in a situation where that famous leopard which I showed you at the start of my presentation will eventually change its spots. So clearly we have a new competitive environment with capacity issues, quality issues, global supply chains which need to be handled very carefully, and new emerging OEMs entering the market. And within this context, suppliers need to know how their competitors rate their customers and an alternative set of customers. And within your strategic planning process, IHS can help you through the OEM supplier relations analysis. Thank you for your attention.